competition law, consumer affairs, and customer protection in the financial sector. These initiatives benefited over 150 business owners, as well as the general public, and provided the Commission with useful feedback on possible modifications to existing legislation. Our government's concern for the rights of businesses and consumers will continue to be emphasized. In this light, the Commission will continue to raise awareness among businesses and consumers on issues related to competition, fair trade, and customer affairs. In order to execute its mandate more effectively and with a view to strengthening its investigative functions over the course of the year, the Commission will be fostering stronger relationships with public and private entities. Furthermore, government will release the rights of procedures for investigating competition law infringements and consumer protection violations in order to streamline the complaints investigation process and to reduce bureaucratic delays in the provision of services, strengthening public administration. Mr. Speaker, the delivery of quality services in a timely manner by the public service will be the driving mandate in strengthening public administration. Reducing red tape and bureaucracy will include the review and improvement of regulations, the mode of delivery and implementation of regulations and standard operating procedures. In addition, we will increase the one-stop shop mode of delivery of services where possible, expand interagency collaboration, make more information and services available via government websites, to name a few. Every budget agency will be tasked with the mandate to improve processing times for delivery of services to the public, and more client-friendly systems will be instituted. Every program will be tasked with developing relevant indicators to track progress on processing times, and these will be monitored by a high-level oversight committee, thereby ensuring greater accountability. Mr. Speaker, in the area of public financial management, work will continue in the strengthening of the national monitoring and evaluation systems, with more in-depth focus on delivery of services in the two pilots, health and education. These sectors consume substantial allocations within the national budget. The development and costing of sectoral strategic plans will be pursued to ensure stronger alignment of policy with implementation plans. Mr. Speaker, even as we support the strengthening of capacity of the Audit Office of Guyana, we will continue to strengthen the internal audit capability within central government and ensure greater oversight for actions taken when recommendations are made for improvement. In addition, the National Procurement and Tender Administration will work towards the institutionalization of training and sensitization sessions in concepts and procedures of procurement, while simultaneously making more information available online. We will strengthen the capacity of procurement officers across government to minimum certification standards and develop capacity for procurement training. Mr. Speaker, cognizant of the growing potential for private investment in public infrastructure and the attendant number and scope of potential public-private partnerships, we will strengthen capacity to structure, negotiate, and administer such transactions. Collectively, this will serve to ensure more successful transactions and more effective mobilization of resources to meet existing infrastructural gaps. The National Insurance Scheme, Mr. Speaker, NIS, will focus on advancing administrative improvements, reducing cost of operations, establishing systems for more effective management of the beneficiary database, and reducing the incidence of incomplete contributor records. During the year, the NIS will ensure that every contributor will be supplied with a statement of contributions on record to ensure verification and reconciliation of all contributors. In addition, the NIS will actively explore options for increasing compliance and widening coverage, especially among the self-employed population. National statistics. Mr. Speaker, Our government places the highest importance on strengthening our systems for data capture and updating our available databases in order to inform more rigorous evidence-based policy making. To this end, Guyana's 2012 population and housing census was conducted last year, with September 15th designated Census Day. During the year, census preparation, staff recruitment and training, and field enumeration were executed. The enumeration process commenced at midnight on Census Day, and the field enumeration was eventually announced as concluded in December, with a total recruitment of 2,936 persons on the activities. In 2013, the coding and editing phases will be executed, and work on the generation of the preliminary count will commence. In addition, a post-enumeration survey will be conducted whereby a random sample of households will be selected and a thorough verification recheck performed to ensure there was full coverage in all 10 regions. In this phase, any household reporting having been missed will be followed up on an individual basis. Further, the data processing aspect of verifying that each questionnaire completed and submitted from the fields has a high degree of accuracy, and the capturing of the data for analysis will continue throughout the year. The first deliverable of the census, the preliminary report, which is a quick count of the population, is expected to be produced in the fourth quarter of 2013. This report presents a brief view of specific demographic indicators prior to the detailed analysis and final report. The detailed tables will be generated and the full census analysis completed in 2014. Governance. Mr. Speaker, in contrast to what were Guyana's cautiously optimistic progress reports in both the 2011 budget and 2012 budget, with regard to matters relating to governance in the Guyana Parliament, events which have unfolded since November 2011, particularly the National Assembly, have tested the mettle of our governance systems and our political maturity. With regards to Guyana's treaty obligations, Guyana in the last year has undertaken several reviews in keeping with its treaty obligations, including before the Committee of Experts on the Implementation of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, the Convention Against All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the International Covenant on the Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights in September 2012. Additionally, draft reports are being prepared for the new conventions we have recently ratified or acceded to, including the Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers and Their Families, and 2 optional protocols of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to our macroeconomic targets for 2013. Real gross domestic product. Mr. Speaker, the domestic economy is projected to achieve real growth of 5.3% in 2013. Once achieved, this would represent the 8th consecutive year of positive growth in Guyana. As a result, Mr. Speaker, of sound and responsible economic management by this government. Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, sugar production is targeted at 240,000 tons. 10.1% above 2012 levels of production. While this target is somewhat lower than the industry's original projection of 260,709 tons for the year, its achievement would still require diligent application and management across the industry throughout the year. The rice industry is expected to continue along its growth path, as the benefits of investment in capacity and improved yields and management practices continue to accrue to the sector. As a result, the industry is projected to record a production level of 440,106 tons, equivalent to 43% growth over the record performance in 2012. The livestock industry is projected to moderate to 4% growth in 2013, having adjusted to the surge in demand last year. On the other hand, the forestry sector is projected to decline by 5.6% as the industry continues to adjust to strengthen monitoring and enforcement activities. The fishing industry is estimated to expand by 2%, sustained by guaranteed domestic and export markets for our seafood products. Industry. Mr. Speaker, the mining and quarrying sector is projected to grow by a further 3% in 2013. Expectedly, the sector's growth will continue to be led by gold, with ongoing favorable outlook for prices and production targeted at 450,031 ounces, representing a 2.6% expansion in output. Mr. Speaker, value added in the bauxite industry is projected to grow by 6.5%, mainly due to increased production in the higher grades of product. The manufacturing sector is projected to record a stronger growth performance of 4.4% in 2013, based on the targeted recovery in sugar and continued strong performance in rice. Mr. Speaker, the services sector has been growing steadily and has been making an increasing contribution to our overall economic performance in recent years. The information and communications sector is projected to expand by 4.5% as businesses continue to embrace and take advantage of the latest digital technology, while the construction industry is targeted to grow by 10%, spurred by continued growth in private sector housing construction and by key projects in the public sector investment program entering construction phase. The continued expansion of the transportation and storage industry is a prerequisite for improved efficiency of operations of most sectors. And following on last year's exceptional performance, the sector is projected to expand by 7.8% in 2013. With private sector construction continuing to grow, rental of dwellings will be the direct beneficiary and is projected to grow by 4%. Electricity and water, education and health and social services are projected to grow by 3.5, that should read, Mr. Speaker, electricity and water, education, and health and social services are projected to grow by 4, 3.5, and 4.4% respectively, while other services are projected to grow by 8%. Monetary policy and inflation. Mr. Speaker, monetary policy will continue to be aimed at price and exchange rate stability and expansion in credit to the private sector. For the year 2013, an inflation rate of 4.3% is targeted, mainly reflecting imported commodity price movements. Balance of payments. Mr. Speaker, the overall balance of payments is expected to register a higher surplus in 2013, amounting to $57.6 million compared to $12.4 million in 2012. The current account deficit is expected to expand to $451.9 million, mainly attributed to projected higher import bill associated with greater local demand, negating the gains in export earnings due to a combination of higher export volume and prices of the main export commodities. The capital account is expected to record a higher surplus of $509.5 million, mainly due to higher inflows of foreign direct investment, concentrated mainly in the mining, energy, and communication sectors. Targets for the non-financial public sector. Central government operations. Total central government current revenue, net of GRIF inflows, is estimated at $142.8 billion, an increase of 10.3%. This outturn is mainly attributed to a 6.3% increase in tax collections by the Guyana Revenue Authority to $125.7 billion. Internal revenue collections are projected at $50.4 billion, 3.8% above 2012 levels, primarily due to projected increased payments from private sector companies and the self-employed. Value-added and excise taxes are estimated at $61.3 billion, a 7.7% increase consistent with the higher demand for commodities, while customs and trade taxes are projected to expand by 9.1% to $14 billion, again consistent with higher import levels. Mr. Speaker, total expenditure is estimated at $205.1 billion, a 19.7% increase over 2012. Capital expenditure is projected to expand by over 50% in 2013 to $85.7 billion, primarily associated with advancement of key infrastructure projects and investments earmarked for the power sector. Principally, Mr. Speaker, investments in GPL and government's equity contribution to the Amaila Falls hydropower project. Non-interest current expenditure is projected to expand by 3.8% to $112.5 billion, underlying which are increased allocations to the social sector in particular. Mr. Speaker, the overall fiscal deficit of the central government is targeted at $29.1 billion, equivalent to 4.6% of GDP, compared to 4.7% in 2012. Mr. Speaker, the size of budget 2013 is $208.8 billion. And I hasten to add, Mr. Speaker, that this represents Guyana's largest budget ever. Summary operations of the public enterprises. Receipts of the public enterprises, Mr. Speaker. Receipts of the public enterprises, Mr. Speaker, are projected to expand by 3.5% to $140 billion, primarily attributed to higher receipts of Gaisuco, consistent with higher production levels, while total expenditure is projected to expand by 4% to $138.9 billion. Based on these developments, an overall surplus of $1 billion is projected to be generated by the enterprises in 2030. Operations of the non-financial public sector. Mr. Speaker, the deficit of the non-financial public sector is targeted to decline to 4.4% of GDP, compared to 4.5% in 2012, and amounting in nominal terms to $28 billion. Measures. Mr. Speaker, the projected reduction in the fiscal deficit as a percent of GDP to which I just referred is in keeping with our government's fiscal consolidation and debt sustainability objectives. Put simply, these objectives are aimed at ensuring that we do not consume today at a level that will leave the next generation of Guyanese with an unsustainable obligation to pay. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2010 contains the following measures, which I now wish to announce. Budget 2013, rather. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2013 contains the following measures, which I now wish to announce. Support to the sugar industry. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, our government's position Mr. Speaker, our government's position on the sugar industry is clear and unequivocal. The industry is still of sufficient systemic importance to the national economy and to the livelihoods of so many rural communities, and has such deep linkages with suppliers and distributors nationwide that no effort must be spared to ensure its long-term viability, competitiveness, and profitability. Over the years, Mr. Speaker, government has injected a total of $39.5 billion to recapitalize the industry and to support its operations. As recently as last year, government provided a transfer of $4 billion to ensure that Gaisuco was able to meet its financing requirements. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that this year, in support of the company's plans to modernize the industry, Budget 2013 provides an amount of $1 billion to be transferred by government to Gaisuco to help the company meet the financing requirements of its transformation plans. This support by government to the sugar industry will redound to the benefit of the industry's 18,000 workers, their families, and suppliers of goods and services to the company countrywide. Together, Mr. Speaker, more than 120,000 persons will benefit directly or indirectly. Support to the Guyana Power and Light Inc. Mr. Speaker, in like manner, it was pointed out that GPL last raised Mr. Speaker, in like manner, it was pointed out that GPL last raised electricity tariffs in 2007, when fuel prices were a fraction of what they are today. The escalation in fuel costs have been borne by GPL in the absence of tariff increases, placing tremendous pressure on the cash flows of the company. For this reason, it was necessary last year for government to inject a transfer of $6 billion into GPL. Those circumstances, Mr. Speaker, remain substantially unchanged. Budget 2013 therefore provides operating and capital transfers to GPL totaling $5.8 billion to support that company in meeting its cash flow requirements. It is worthwhile to mention that in addition to the $5.8 billion budgeted to be transferred to GPL in 2013, government is also budgeting a further $5.4 billion to be invested by GPL to support key projects such as the upgrade of its transmission and distribution network, the loss reduction program, and other activities required in anticipation of the Amila Falls hydropower project. These allocations to the electricity sector, Mr. Speaker, will benefit all 166,000 of GPL's customers and their families. Linden Electricity. Mr. Speaker, it would be recalled that efforts were initiated in last year's budget to gradually align the electricity rates paid by the residents of Linden with those paid by electricity customers on the GPL grid. The unfortunate events following those proposals are now well known, leading to the agreement that a committee be established to examine the matter of electricity rates in Linden. Mr. Speaker, pending the completion of the work of that committee, Budget 2013 allocates sums totaling $2.9 billion to meet the cost of maintaining the electricity subsidy in Linden and Kwakwani. so that 10,363 electricity customers in Region 10 can continue to benefit from the currently prevailing rates through the remainder of the year. Mr. Speaker, at current rates, this translates to a benefit of $279,801 per electricity customer per annum, or $23,317 per month. We continue, Mr. Speaker, to urge timely completion of the committee's deliberations so that this matter can be brought to conclusion. Old age pensions. Mr. Speaker, this government has steadily increased the non-contributory old age pension paid as a supportive supplement to persons over the age of 65 years. The monthly pension has been increased annually from $3,500 in 2006 to $10,000 last year. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that Budget 2013 provides for the old age pension to be increased to $12,500 per month. An increase of 25%. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, Budget 2013 provides for the old age pension to be increased from $10,000 per month to $12,500 per month. A 25% increase with effect from 1st of May 2013. Mr. Speaker, the annual impact of this increase would result in an additional $1.3 billion of disposable income being placed in the hands of our 42,500 senior citizens, and will bring the overall old age pension bill to a total of $6 billion in 2013. OAP, Old Age Pensioners Electricity Assistance Program. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the old age pension we pay every month to our senior citizens, government also spends in excess of $200 million annually assisting our senior citizens to pay the water charges they incur at the Guyana Water Inc. I am now pleased to announce that with effect from 2013, government will make a contribution to help each old age pensioner who is a customer of GPL meet the electricity charges they incur with that company. In this regard, government will provide each old age pensioner with assistance of up to $20,000 per annum to provide GPL for electricity charges incurred. Mr. Speaker, this assistance will reduce the electricity charges. This assistance will reduce the electricity charges that will have to be met by each pensioner who is a GPL customer, and will have the effect of increasing the disposable income of our senior citizen population by a further $590 million per annum. National Insurance Scheme. Mr. Speaker, the challenges faced by the National Insurance Scheme are well known. For some time, actuarial recommendations have been before those charged with administering the scheme. The dilemma has been the balance that needs to be struck between addressing the deficiencies of the scheme while minimizing the impact on workers and their employers. Although there is no doubt that administrative measures might help to improve the financial position of the scheme, these could not possibly remedy in fullness the structural deficiency. The reality has been growing benefits, a beneficiary population that is aging and therefore in receipt of pensions and other benefits for more years than were anticipated at the time they commenced participation in the scheme, and a contributing population that has not been growing as rapidly as it should, especially amongst the self-employed. The reality is equally that it would be difficult to devise a lasting solution to the challenges faced by the scheme without confronting the need for an increase in the contribution rate. Mr. Speaker, I therefore wish to announce that with effect from June 1, 2013, the contribution rate for both employed and self-employed contributors will be increased by 1 percentage point. This will generate additional revenue for the NIS of approximately $890 million per annum. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure that the vulnerable feel no impact as a result of this increase, I wish to further announce that government will meet both the employers' and the employees' share of the increase in contribution payable with respect to all employed persons whose income is not more than $50,000 per month. This initiative will cost the government approximately $215 million per annum and will benefit 58,300 contributors. Property tax on companies. Mr. Speaker, property tax is currently charged on companies at the following rates. The first $1.5 million of net property is taxed at 0%. The next $5 million of net property is taxed at 0.5%. And the remainder of net property is taxed at 0.75%. I now wish to announce that with effect from year of assessment 2014, companies will be charged at the following rates. The first $10 million of net property will be taxed at 0%. The next $15 million of net property will be taxed at 0.5%. And the remainder of net property will be taxed at 0.75%. In other words, Mr. Speaker, whereas the current tax-free threshold for property tax on companies is $1.5 million, the new threshold will be $10 million. As a result of which thousands of small businesses with net property below $10 million will no longer be subject to property tax. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the valuation date for the purposes of the property tax will be revised from January 1, 1991 to January 1, 2011. Property tax on individuals. Mr. Speaker, property tax is currently charged on individuals at the following rates. The first $7.5 million of net property is taxed at 0%. The next $5 million of net property is taxed at 0.5%. And the remainder of net property is taxed at 0.75%. I now wish to announce that with effect from year of assessment 2014, individuals will be charged at the following rates. The first $40 million of net property will be taxed at 0%. And the remainder of net property will be taxed at 0.75%. In other words, Mr. Speaker, whereas the current tax-free threshold for property tax on individuals is $7.5 million, the new threshold will be $40 million. As a result of which tens of thousands of low and middle income earners with net property below $40 million will no longer be subject to property tax. As with companies, the valuation date for the purposes of the property tax will be revised from January 1, 1991 to January 1, 2011. Mortgage interest relief. Mr. Speaker, this government's housing program has been a resounding success and has resulted in tens of thousands of Guyanese individuals and families graduating from being tenants of rented property to being homeowners in their own right. Armed with real property as an asset which in turn can be collateralized, the positive consequences for owner participation in the formal financial system and owner capacity to borrow to finance asset acquisition or even small business establishment and expansion have been immeasurable. In addition to our programs to develop housing areas and distribute house lots, other policies have been adopted to promote homeownership. These include the special low-income housing windows established at the commercial banks, under which interest income earned by the banks is exempt from corporate taxes. This has allowed the commercial banks to offer subsidized interest rates to borrowers of loans for low-income housing development. Coupled with the rapid growth in low-income homeownership, Mr. Speaker, has been equally rapid growth in demand for middle-income housing, with the growing number of young professionals and other middle-income earners in our society today. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to announce that with effect from year of income 2013, first-time homeowners who are the holders of mortgage loans of up to $30 million granted to them by commercial banks or the building society will be permitted to deduct the interest they pay on such mortgages from their taxable income. First, I will repeat, Mr. Speaker, first-time homeowners who are holders of mortgage loans of up to $30 million granted to them by commercial banks or the building society will be permitted to deduct the interest they pay on such mortgages from their taxable income for the purposes of personal income tax. In other words, Mr. Speaker, that portion of taxable income used by a first-time homeowner to pay interest on a housing loan of up to $30 million from a commercial bank or building society will be exempt from personal income tax. Mr. Speaker, this initiative will cost government approximately $580 million and will benefit tens of thousands of first-time homeowners, low and middle income alike. Personal income tax. Mr. Speaker, over the years, this government has sought to reduce progressively the share of tax revenue borne by the most vulnerable. This effort has seen the personal income tax threshold increased from $25,000 per month in 2006 to $50,000 per month in 2012. Most recently, as a result of last year's upward adjustment of the threshold from $40,000 to $50,000 per month, some 21,000 persons were removed from the tax net. Currently, Mr. Speaker, the first $50,000 of income per month or $600,000 of income per annum is free of income tax, and the remainder of income is subject to personal income tax at a rate of 33 1/3. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to announce that with effect from year of income 2013, personal income tax will be charged on income above the current threshold of $50,000 per month or $60,000 per annum at the rate of $50,000 per month or $600,000 per annum at a rate of 30% instead of 33 1/3. As a result of this reduction in the personal income tax rate, more than 184,000 taxpayers will benefit with higher take-home pay, and an additional $1.8 billion of disposable income will be placed annually in the hands of the tax-paying public. Conclusion. Mr. Speaker, I commenced my presentation of Budget 2013 by alluding to the challenges we face, both external and other, and I recommitted our government to working together with like-minded stakeholders to confront these and any other impending obstacles, always in the cause of that which is good for Guyana. Mr. Speaker, this People's Progressive Party civic government takes this obligation very seriously. Every day in government, policies are being formulated and programs implemented to improve the lives of the Guyanese people. The progress might not always be visible overnight, but it is very real, and we see it in almost all aspects of national life, and indeed in so many aspects of our own personal lives too. If we cast our eyes back over just the past year, fraught though it might have been with challenges that none of us could remotely have anticipated, our government's persistence in the responsibility of our policies and the prudence of our economic management saw us end the year with results of which we can all be proud as a nation. Like I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, a 7th consecutive year of real growth at nearly 5%. The highest ever production of rice and gold in those industries' history, except for Omai. 23% growth in export receipts. Total FDI of $293.7 million US. Our highest ever level of external reserves, totaling $862 million US. And 20% growth in private sector credit. All point to the outstanding performance of the Guyanese economy over the past year. More importantly, Mr. Speaker, as I've often been at pains to emphasize, this outstanding macroeconomic performance in defiance of challenging conditions is as much an accomplishment of those of us who make and implement policy as it is of those of us who save and invest our capital and of those of us who go to work every day in the fields and factories and in the mines and offices, producing goods and services and adding to the value added of our economy. Mr. Speaker, I hasten to add that the gains of the past year were not only denominated in macroeconomic indicators. Important though we know them to be, these are often underappreciated for their relevance to our day-to-day lives. The gains were also felt, even if not always noticed, by the 498 young persons who obtained first-time employment last year in a call center, by the 5,869 new owners of a house lot who received their allocation letters last year, by the 4,596 computer users who discovered the world of ICT for the first time under the OLPF, by the 10,601 hinterland families who now enjoy solar electricity as a result of the hinterland electrification program. To all of these people, Mr. Speaker, Guyana was a better place, and they were in better circumstances at the end of 2012 than at the start. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2013 builds on these gains. It ensures the preservation and further improvement of the environment that is so critical to attracting investments and creating jobs. It includes policies and programs that will bring visible improvements to our physical infrastructure and our social services. It includes initiatives that will manifest themselves in a more modern Guyana and a more comfortable Guyanese people. Budget 2013 includes something for all Guyanese. The 4,500 old age pensioners who will receive a higher pension from May. The young professional who will repay her mortgage more quickly now because of the mortgage interest relief she will receive. The farmer who will produce more because of the affordable inputs he will now be able to access. The young, recently qualified doctor who will embark on an exciting new profession in the public healthcare system. The single mother who will access her first loan under the expanded WOW program, and so many others. With this budget, Mr. Speaker, this People's Progressive Party civic government takes yet another important step forward in facilitating development in our country and in improving the lives of every Guyanese. It is this daily transformation of our country and an advancement of our people's well-being to which we in this House must rededicate ourselves as we consider Budget 2013. The question we must constantly ask ourselves is whether each decision we take would bring betterment to our country and its people. And our answer, Mr. Speaker, must always be motivated not by the perverse urge to demonstrate the sheer might of the vote we are already known to have, but by the much humbler obligation we owe to use that vote responsibly. Mr. Speaker, on that note, I commend Budget 2013 to the National Assembly, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, honourable members. Thank you, honourable Minister, and thank you, members, for your patience and attentiveness.